Hello, and welcome to Fraud Talk, the ACFE's monthly podcast. I'm Stefanie Hallgren, the ACFE's Public Relations Specialist, and today I'm joined by Brandi Pritchard, CFE, Assistant Director of Special Investigations at the Office of the Washington State Auditor. Brandi, thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So basically today we're going to be talking about the ACFE's International Fraud Awareness Week, which is Fraud Week for short. It's just around the corner, November 17th through the 23rd. Every year, organizations around the world sign up to show their stance against fraud and promote anti-fraud education to their communities during Fraud Week. After signing up, I'd say probably one of the questions I get the most from supporters is, what can I do to participate in Fraud Week? Well, you can go to fraudweek.com for some ideas, or look to other supporting organizations for some ideas. That's why we brought Brandi on board today. Brandi's organization, the Office of the Washington State Auditor, is a Fraud Week ambassador that gets really creative with the Fraud Week activities. So we brought her on today so she can tell us a little bit about what her organization has planned for this Fraud Week. First, Brandi, let's talk about the Washington State Auditor's Office. Brandi, can you give us a brief overview of its role in fraud prevention and detection?
Absolutely. So, one thing that's really great about living in Washington that sets up our office really well to help play a big role in fraud prevention and detection in Washington's governments is that both the citizens of Washington and the legislature have continually shown their support. They've shown continually that they care about government accountability and that they care about fraud. So, because of that, we have a lot of constitutional and statutory authorities that allow us to really lean into this fraud topic. And there's kind of a few tiers to how we do that. So first and foremost, we feel our role at State Auditor's Office is not to be an internal control for our government, but rather to help empower themselves to have the right controls in place, the right systems, so that they can be on the front line of preventing fraud and detecting it if it should occur. And we accomplish that. One of the ways is through our normal audits. So we are tasked by state law to conduct regular audits of all governments in Washington, both state governments and local governments. So think your biggest state agencies, large PUDs and counties and city of Seattle and large governments down to the smallest little mosquito control districts and irrigation districts. And while we perform regular audits that you might expect, so financial statement audits, performance audits, we also have a whole suite of cybersecurity audits. But I think the audit type that helps us lean most into fraud prevention and detection is what we call our accountability audits. So those are really based on compliance and safeguarding of public resources. So our auditors are going out to these governments and they're assessing their systems and trying to figure out if their internal control systems are adequate to prevent or detect misappropriation from happening. And then they follow that up with testing to see if anybody did, in fact, exploit any of those weaknesses. And the result of that audit is a report of recommendations back to our government. So again, we're giving them that information to help empower them. To partner with that, we also have a lot of training and resources. So I work on our special investigations team. And we partner with another division of our office called the Center for Government Innovation. And we provide kind of both sides of the fraud conversation for training and resources. So our special investigations team focuses more on case studies and very fraud specific training and resources. And then the center provides more of the baseline internal control, segregation of duties. So we provide training all across the state to government associations. We've done quite a few national conferences. We're even presenting at some college classes and university classes to try to spark some people into joining the fraud fight with us and joining this profession. And I mentioned we have a lot of resources too. So for example, one of my favorite ones we put out a few years ago, it's called Trust But Verify. And that was a guide that we wrote that was aimed at the elected and appointed officials because we know that they are so crucial in setting the tone for fraud fighting. So we wrote this resource for them to help them kind of understand their role and then hopefully to empower them to feel confident in what they can do. So we have, if you're new to fraud fighting and you don't know where to go, here's our top recommendations for you. So that's kind of the first tier is, again, empowering our governments in the fraud fight. And then the second tier is kind of the more unfortunate one, which is that when fraud does happen, And that's where our special investigations team comes in, and we help investigate those cases. So we're not on the law enforcement criminal side. Our goal is just to figure out what happened, how did it happen, what were the internal control weaknesses, and then of course, who was responsible and the dollar amount, so that we can aid our governments in seeking restitution. We do give our work over to local prosecutors so that they can decide if they want to pursue any legal action on the criminal side. But again, that's kind of outside of our office. So we have quite a few fraud investigations that we do. Our audits that I mentioned earlier have found some of the largest cases in Washington. Plus, there's a state law that requires governments to immediately report all known or suspected losses to us. So we get about between 300 to 500 cases coming our way each year that we triage and choose what to do with. But the good news, if there is good news in fraud, is that we can then learn from those investigations when they come our way, figure out again what happened and how did it happen, and then we can kind of cycle back up to tier one again, which is taking that information back to our governments, back to our auditors through training and resources to hopefully, again, better equip them to fight fraud moving forward.
All right, Brandi, we're going to talk about International Fraud Awareness Week now, because I know that your organization is they are big supporters of Fraud Week, and we always enjoy seeing what they have planned for each year. Can you tell us how y'all plan to participate this year?
Absolutely. Yeah, we get really excited about Fraud Week. So I'm excited to talk about this topic today. So we start by a conversation that happens months ahead of time. So either in August or September, we have a planning meeting between our special investigations team and then our communications team, because even though we might have a bunch of really good ideas of things we want to talk about with fraud, it really takes that partnership with our communications team to make that happen and happen in the right ways. So looking at more of our external audiences, one of the big things we do is our social media posts. We use a variety of platforms. We have amazing folks, again, on our communications team that are doing a few things. One of them is finding ACFE resources, either from fraudweek.com or just by kind of perusing other agencies, other governments, other businesses, and seeing what content they're putting out there and then just reposting it. We also point to some of our own stuff as well. So as part of Fraud Week, we are issuing new articles, posting things on our website, creating resources. And so we're using social media to help announce some of those as well. So just some ideas. One of our more famous or more popular posts, I should say, that we did, we call it our popcorn article kind of informally, but a few years in a row, we had an article where we said it's getting towards the end of Fraud Week. Why don't you sit down with a bucket of popcorn and consume some of our most highly recommended fraud media. So we gave them a list of podcasts, documentaries, movies, all kind of in the fraud theme. So as you can imagine, like all the Queen's Horses, that's a gimme, right? Everybody has to watch that one. So that particular post tends to get a lot of attention. This year, we're also going to do a recap article on the top 5 fraud investigation reports we issued this year. Another popular post in the past is we had put out what we called a bank statement review playbook, where if you're the person tasked with reviewing bank statements for your organization, here's our top recommendations of things to look for. So a lot of activity happening on social media. And I mentioned some articles. That's another piece. We have an Audit Connection blog on our website, and we try to post articles leading up to Fraud Awareness Week to help say, here's what's coming next week. Make sure you're watching our channels for more information. And then obviously during Fraud Week, we are posting a lot as well. Our goal is to try to issue about 1 article per day, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then we recap that through an email that we send out to our clients. And that email goes out to somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000 people. So we have a very wide reach, fortunately. So again, it's another tool that we can use to get that information out. We also kind of take over that email too. It has a specific kind of branding and logo and look, but our communications team lets us kind of take it over. So we use one of the logos on fraudweek.com as kind of the header for the email, just to kind of, again, set that tone and make it something a little different and exciting. And same thing with our website. On our landing page on our website, we update our main state auditor's office graphic, and we change it to, again, usually either one of the ones that we can find on Fraud Week or something that we've created as kind of a variation of that. And then we also use our website to highlight some of our fraud resources. And then another cool thing that we've done, we started a few years ago, is trying to post short videos, usually on social media. And we do that to try to kind of humanize the efforts. So it's not just an article that you're reading. So for example, a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year, we did a video where each of us on the special investigations team recorded a short 20 to 30-second video where we talked about why we're in this profession. Why are we fraud fighters, and what do we appreciate about it? So that was kind of fun. This year, we're doing more of a Ask the Frauditor style, where we're soliciting questions, and then we'll record, again, a short 20 to 30-second video where we're answering one of the most common fraud questions that we get. So those are some of the things we're doing externally. A new thing that we've just added this year, we haven't done in the past, is I mentioned we do regular audits. So our auditors are out there performing about 2,400 audits every year. So we thought that was another way that we could gain some attention for Fraud Week and some of our efforts. So we've added a slide into the template slide deck that our auditors are using for those key meetings. So the key entrance conference, the key exit conference, as just one more opportunity to get that word out. In other years, we've tried to find ways where we can partner with other organizations. So for example, the Washington Finance Officers Association, they issue, I think it's a quarterly newsletter. So we've written articles for them as well to just find all the avenues that we can to be a voice for Fraud Week. So that's kind of external. Internal, we have over 400 people that work for us here at SAO. And so we feel like that's a big role for us as well in Fraud Week, is how we can connect with our own people. So this year we have an all-staff summit, or it's basically a virtual staff meeting that's taking place during Fraud Awareness Week. So our elected state auditor, Pat McCarthy, will be using some of her time to talk about Fraud Week and encourage all of our staff to lean in and take some training and really engage in some of our activities. We also, all of our teams ask for it every year. We have to have a game. That's a big part of what we do internally. They love the games. So we've had some creative folks on our special investigations team. A few years ago, one of them created a game that's basically Candyland, but they called it Fraudyland, and it was really fun and creative. It had like the swindling sand dunes and lake larceny, and so she developed this whole Candyland themed board that was really fun that the teams got to play. We've done quiz shows, Jeopardy style, and this year we're using an online software provider called CrowdPurr. And we're doing, it's a mix of like trivia bingo. So the teams really enjoy that. It's a fun way to get some active participation and to make sure that they're keeping up on their fraud knowledge. So it's kind of a two-sided benefit there. We also provide fraud training to them during Fraud Week. So this year they're getting a training that's recapping a few of our larger case studies for cases that we issued on this year, as well as a whole topic about what we call the trust trap. And that's talking about why so many governments tend to have the trusted employee problem, where they put too much trust in some of their key finance folks without proper monitoring or verification. And so we really dive into that, talk about the fraud triangle, different types of fraudsters, and ways that we can engage in conversations with our clients. We also do daily internal articles as well. So really, we try to match our external efforts with what we can also do internally to make sure we're really fully leaning into Fraud Week on both sides.
I love seeing your organization's social media posts because it just seems like you are just having a great time on Fraud Week. Of course, it's a serious topic, and we're glad that you're getting that fraud education, that anti-fraud education out there, but you're also having a great time while doing it.
Absolutely. We have a gentleman, Mike Carter, in our communications department, and he's just really fun, but I think he really enjoys Fraud Week as well. I keep trying to figure out if I can make him become a CFE as well. I feel like we could bring him in. He'd be good.
He should. I just became a CFE a few months ago, so I'll try to talk him into it. So, how do you believe that International Fraud Awareness Week helps raise awareness about fraud prevention, both within Washington state and on a global scale?
I think first and foremost, there's just something about it that creates a buzz. It makes this week it makes people lean in. It grabs more attention. And so, like an analogy I could use would be cleaning your house, right? So we all probably do some level of cleaning of our house on maybe a daily basis. But there's just something about saying, this week we're doing spring cleaning that changes the level of engagement. You lean in more, you're probably going to strategize a bit more, and you're not just going to sweep your kitchen, you're probably going to pull your refrigerator out and sweep behind it finally. And that's kind of how I feel about Fraud Week. There's just something about it that turns the we shoulds. We should provide training. We should update our policy. We should lean into this conversation. And it helps translate it over to actual action. Because what better time is there really to take some of these steps that maybe you've been wanting to do and haven't prioritized yet? Here at SAO, it gives us a lot of opportunity to really focus on some of the important resources and get some conversations going. Again, because we have more attention on our communication tools, we get more people coming to our website, more people engaging in our social media because it's an interesting topic, and it allows us to really get those resources out. It also allows us the opportunity to build some stories and themes around our work. So, for example, we've noticed over the past years that we've definitely had a string of cases happening in our smallest government. So, having Fraud Week is a great time to kind of reflect on the last time period and say, what are the themes and the trends that we're seeing? And we can kind of build some cases around that, build some messaging, and then use Fraud Week to get that information out to make sure we're reaching those folks. So in this case, making sure we're reaching out to the right government associations and the right governments to let them know that we're seeing this theme and to start partnering up on how we can attack that. And again, like I mentioned, it results in higher traffic to our website because we're doing so much content, so much promotion. And I mean, obviously true crime is kind of popular, and I think fraud fits right along with it. So I think people appreciate and enjoy consuming some of this content. And so it's such a great opportunity for us to grab their attention and then bring them back to our website where we say, and here are the resources that will help you in doing that. Here is the training. Here are the other tools that we have available to you. So we feel like it's just a great week again to really get people to lean in and maybe pay more attention and come to our website or other places to find some of that fraud prevention and detection tools that they're looking for.
Well, I guess just kind of related to what you were just talking about, what kind of impact have you seen from your office's involvement in International Fraud Awareness Week over the years?
Definitely more attention. We're getting a lot of engagement in the places where we want to. We have more people visiting our website. We're getting more downloads of our resources, which hopefully means that more people are using them. Again, and this all goes with our intent of empowering our governments to be the front line for fraud prevention and detection. So we get really excited when we get more traffic to these places. So just as an example of some of the engagement, back in 2022, we shared one of the ACFE resources. It was a graphic that was behavioral red flags of fraud. And we posted that out on our social media channel. And that post alone got over 22,000 impressions, 1,300 reactions, and then a new user base of 150 new users, which again gets us excited because those are users that now are following our channel. And then throughout the year, as we're posting other fraud content, it's more folks that we can reach with those messages. And we're also seeing bigger interest overall in our fraud investigation work, more people responding when we issue our fraud investigations. And then we're having more organizations, more government associations that are reaching out to us and asking us to be at the table. We're getting invited to do more training, even some places where we haven't been able to train there in the past, we're now getting invites. So just as a couple examples, every year we provide fraud training to the Washington Finance Officers Association. We've always done that as part of a breakout session But with the growing interest in fraud and fraud prevention and detection, for the last 2 years, they've asked us to move it to their general session so that we can speak to their entire audience all at once, because it's definitely some growing popularity for the subject. Also this year, State Auditor McCarthy and myself were asked to visit it was called the AWC Mayors Exchange, which is a group of mayors that get together. And I don't know that we've been invited to speak to the audience before, but one of the areas I mentioned before was that we're seeing a lot of cases in our smaller governments, which includes small cities and towns. So we were really excited to be able to talk to this new group, because the mayors in those small organizations play such a pivotal role, being the key oversight for monitoring. So we were really excited to get that invitation to go speak with them. So definitely a lot more interest, a lot more engagement. And internally, we're seeing definitely an increase in folks that are excited to go get their CFE license as well. So that's been kind of a fun little side effect as well that we're enjoying.
That's so great. What preventative measures does your office promote during International Fraud Awareness Week to help organizations and individuals protect themselves against fraud?
I think the one that we promote probably the most, we kind of joke it's the bumper sticker of our special investigations team a little, is reviewing the bank statements. So we've found in our office that a lot of the large cases that we've detected ourselves, we have found through reviewing the government's bank statement and seeing something that popped out as a red flag to us. And similarly, some of the large cases that our governments are finding for themselves, it's the same thing. They're finding it by reviewing the bank statement. So really, we've had a big messaging push over the last few years about the importance of somebody independent reviewing the bank statements. We have a lot of content out there on our website, but that's definitely a key message that we carry forward in all of our trainings, and definitely during Fraud Awareness Week as well. I also mentioned our Trust But Verify guide. That's very similar. We do talk about bank statement review in that guide, as well as reviewing some of the areas where we're finding more cases pop up, such as payroll and overtime. And so again, we're kind of using that guide and pushing that forward as a way to inform our electeds and appointeds on some of the things that they should be looking at to help in fraud detection. We have a lot of internal control resources that we're discussing as well. I mean, it would take me the rest of our time together to list all the ones on our website, but we have a really great one that I'd recommend. It's our segregation of duties guide, and it talks about not only what does it mean to segregate duties, why is it important, and then it really gets down system by system. And at the end, there's a really helpful appendix where you can look up recommendations based on your size of your finance department. So if you have a 2-person finance department, there's a whole chapter for just folks with a 2-person finance department, and it helps you figure out where you should segregate duties and then where you would implement key monitoring. And then we're also during Fraud Week just encouraging folks to do even the most simple things, even something as simple as reading your fraud policy with your department, updating it if it needs it, or sitting down and finding a free fraud training. Even the simplest things can go a long way in preventing and detecting fraud.
For sure. That's what Fraud Week is all about. It's not just about the big things that you can be doing to get out there in your community, even if you're just influencing and like sharing some anti-fraud education with a few of your community members. That's a big deal too, like you're doing the job of Fraud Week. Brandi, what are some of the biggest challenges you face in fraud detection and prevention at the state level, and how does participating in Fraud Week help address those challenges?
I feel that one of our bigger problems right now in fraud prevention and detection at the government level in Washington is more aimed at some of the smaller governments, and it's kind of a twofold. One of them being limited staff. So again, it's hard to segregate duties adequately when you only have a couple staff. So making sure that they have the information that they need to be able to replace that segregation of duties with the right monitoring controls. And the second one that tends to partner with that is, again, what I would call the trust trap. It's when governments are giving too much trust, too many key financial duties to one person without that adequate monitoring. We feel that, providing too much trust without the monitoring piece is a key reason why a lot of fraud is happening in government. why a lot of fraud is not being detected by the governments. And unfortunately, occasionally it can also result into us even getting some pushback as we're investigating, because again, when you feel confident that you know that you can trust somebody, sometimes that's a hard mental barrier to get over. So some of the things that we can do during Fraud Week is it gives us an opportunity to have some of these important conversations about trust, for example, outside of the audit sphere. So obviously, if we come to a government and say, hey, I know you're long-standing finance person that's been here forever, that you really put a lot of trust in, it looks like there's some misappropriation happening. That can be kind of a tough pill to swallow. But if we're having that conversation outside of the audit, we're having it during Fraud Week, we're kind of prefacing these conversations with, let's just talk about trust in general, not your person specifically. Let's talk in general. And we can kind of help them understand, some of the cognitive pieces that goes along with trusting folks too much. We're kind of planting those seeds early so that if something were to unfortunately happen, they're a little more ready for the conversations. And generally, too, as we're giving out information about ways to prevent and detect fraud, the goal is always that maybe that person will come across a red flag later and think back to something they learned during Fraud Week that might make them think twice, rather than saying like, oh, this transaction looks suspicious, but it's probably okay. Maybe they'll think back to something they learned in Fraud Week and say, well, I heard that trust but verify is important, so maybe I'll take one next step and dig into it a little bit more. And then looking internally, so that's kind of the external focus. Internally, like a lot of audit shops, during the pandemic, we had some turnover. So we are training a newer workforce on some teams. So again, Fraud Awareness Week is a great time to grab their attention as well and talk to them about fraud, about professional skepticism, how to design audit tests, reviewing the bank statements, and then encourage them to take some fraud training as well. So that's kind of helping us overcome some of that challenge that we're having with making sure that we're providing all the right resources and training to our staff.
Okay, so we're going to look ahead a little bit to the future. How do you think the Washington State Auditor's Office plans to expand its efforts or evolve its strategies for fraud prevention in the coming years?
One thing I know I'm excited about that we didn't tackle this year, so definitely on my 2025 list, is providing more resources on our website and using Fraud Awareness Week to get folks there. So kind of the same strategy, but the product that they get when they go there maybe will be a little different. And specifically, right now, to get fraud training, you usually have to go to a conference, or even if they're a member of association, there's usually some travel involved to get to that conference. We want to reduce that barrier a bit. So our goal is to be able to record more free training, webinars, e-learning, put that all on the fraud page of our website. And then that way, we're not only talking generally about fraud during Fraud Week, but we'll be able to follow it up with, if you're really interested in this topic, go to our website where you'll find a free training or free webinar where you can learn more.
So this question is for all the organizations that they're kind of on the fence about Fraud Week. They're thinking about joining, but they just need a little guidance to get there. So Brandi, for organizations that want to get involved, what advice would you offer to help them make the most of their participation?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost is don't feel like you have to start big, start small. It can be the tiniest thing. It could be maybe you just this year sit down in your own department and review your fraud policy, something really simple. I feel like that's how our office started, was just a few goals for Fraud Week. And then every year we get more excited and we just keep adding to it. So feel free and start small and have confidence moving forward. Definitely visit the Fraud Week website. There's just so much amazing information out there. It feels like that's growing every year as well. And sometimes we use that content, and other times just reading through the content is enough to help spark some other ideas that you might want to do. So definitely visit. Plan a strategy meeting. So one thing that can be overwhelming is if you wait until Fraud Week to decide what you're going to do for Fraud Week. So I definitely recommend putting something on the calendar. Every year in November, after Fraud Week is done, we try to schedule next year's meeting. So don't even have to think about it. It's already on our calendar, again, for probably August or September. So you have time to get things ready. And then when you have those strategy meetings, bring the right people to the table. Don't feel like you have to shoulder the responsibility alone. So for our organization, I mentioned we bring in our communications team, and they've been just absolutely instrumental in most of the efforts that we have during Fraud Week. So feel free to expand beyond who you might normally consider your fraud folks and invite other people to the table. You can also connect with other people locally. So your local ACFE chapter will be a great resource for ideas. And then if nothing else, social media is such an easy way to engage in Fraud Week. Even if all you do is find other folks' content. So of course, I would hope that everybody follows ACFE. Even if you just reshared some of their posts, that can make a huge difference in taking those conversations and then giving them to people that maybe aren't otherwise following those channels. Maybe they wouldn't otherwise see that content. So really engaging with social is such a great way to start.
For sure. We can't say that enough. Like even the smallest thing, even if organizations think like, oh, I'm not doing that much that's really getting out there, you're doing enough. You're getting that anti-fraud education out there, and that's a great job. Don't forget, if you're an organization that wants to participate in Fraud Week, you still have time to sign up. Just head to fraudweek.com and find our sign-up form, free resources, and to see events you can take part in. Brandi, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your organization's plans for Fraud Week and a little about what you all do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening. You can find this podcast along with all other episodes of Fraud Talk on acfe.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. This has been Stefanie Hallgren, signing off.